Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of The First Gen Psychologist. In this series, we cover topics that destigmatize mental health, as well as topics for personal development and empowerment centered on the first gen experience. I'm Dr. Lisette, aka The First Gen Psychologist. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am a first gen Latina psychologist, leadership coach, speaker, writer, but today I am your host. And today I am so excited for today's topic. Today's topic is centered on overcoming that sentiment of I am not enough. And within that, we will be uncovering more about people pleasing, perfectionism, and burnout. And the amazing human who's going to help guide us through all of this is Angela Tam, who is a life and leadership coach to first and second gen adult children of immigrants of color. So let me share with you a little bit more about Angela. Angela Tam, whose pronouns are they, she, is a proud queer child of Chinese Vietnamese refugees. She's a mental health therapist, entrepreneur, and life and leadership coach for adult children of immigrants of color. She understands both personally and professionally the problems that we might uniquely face with wanting to honor ancestral legacies while breaking intergenerational cycles of our own. Angela Tam is a strong believer that our body's wisdom holds the key to breaking harmful cycles and creating new legacies. So welcome, Angela. I'm so happy. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
I feel so honored to be having this conversation with you. This conversation is something that really comes close to my heart and my personal story. So I hope that, in sharing some of that, a lot of folks will really feel like they're not alone. So that's really just like really my intention here. Yeah.
Yeah. Feel not alone and maybe feel less of not enough. Maybe feeling a little bit enough, a
Yeah,
little bit more than enough.
absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
so,
Thank you for having me.
yeah. And so I'm going to just get straight into this. What is this I am not enough narrative? And how, as a first gen professional myself, this is something that I've experienced. And I'd love to hear your story around it.
Yeah, it's really what it sounds like. It's this story messages that we tell ourselves. So like I think if we could zone out a little bit, if you grew up in a family that's in survival mode all the time, survival mode, like with
Yeah.
parents of immigrants who are just don't have enough financially or time wise or energy wise to really um, give their children truly what is enough in terms of time and energy. Um, Kids, when we grow up in these survival modes, which a lot of first, second gen folks grew up in, we adapt and we cope by telling ourselves certain messages about us. We don't tell messages about like the environment or our caregivers, about the dysfunction, but we really turn that dysfunction inward and we start telling stories and making up stories. Like little kids make up stories all the time. I have 3 kids upstairs, and you probably could hear them right now. They're making a lot of noise. They're 9, 6, and 1.5. They are really creative about their storytelling. And I noticed they make up a lot of stories about just what's going on. If friends are going through a tough time, they make up stories about that just to make sense of it. But this is the key. I think this is something that's really important for all of us to understand is that like the not enough narrative comes from us making up stories about ourselves, not about others, but ourselves about
Yeah.
why we are just not measuring up. Why, if we have critical parents, like a lot of us immigrants of color grew up with parents who are very rigid, very high pressure, very critical, not for bad intentions, but for survival and we make up stories about how we are not measuring up. And that narrative, that story of like, I'm not good enough, sticks in us. And we continue to do
Yeah.
that till today. We're like full blown professionals, maybe like experts in our field,
Yeah.
whatever field you're in. And there's just this little voice that has this survival mechanism that
Mhm.
says I'm not enough. And so that's my interpretation of that not enough narrative is and where it
Yeah.
comes from.
Yeah, and Angela, I think I was hearing you talk. I was thinking back to my own experience of like, oh, how did that narrative, like, what were the stories I would tell myself, right? And it made me think a lot about parentification and emotional parentification, where you suddenly take on that responsibility for the well-being, emotional well-being of those around you. And I think that's where the "I'm not enough" narrative started for me. This feeling of,
Mm,
oh, feeling such a strong responsibility for my parents' emotional wellness. And when they weren't doing well, or if they were stressed, working really hard, just tired, maybe irritable from the exhaustion, I would, and maybe I would get reprimanded for something, and they would snap at me, and I would think, wow, I'm doing something wrong. I need to do better. Like, I am not enough. And, because I don't have the, I guess, ability to think critically enough at that age. I'm going back to, 4, 5, 6 years old, like trying to make sense of the world around me. I don't think I could understand this is bigger than me, right? Now, as an adult, I could look back and I'm like, oh, this is so much bigger than me. They were doing their best. And with everything they had, they just had more limited access to certain resources. So it's not that I wasn't enough, society wasn't enough, right? There wasn't enough resources to support my
yep.
family with navigating so much. And so,
Yeah, that's such a good observation connection. When I was just jumping on a call today about talking
yeah.
about how like our parents' moodiness affected
Mhm.
us, and the moodiness that you talk about is like a big theme in first, second gen families where our parents would just like be irritable, moody, on edge. And I think as kids, for me, I interpret that as if I could just do things quicker, if I could just like make sure I don't get
Mhm.
in trouble, if I don't
Yeah.
if I just like did whatever they wanted me to do right away, then they
Yeah.
wouldn't be so quick to snap at me. That's how it showed up in my family. And I know a lot of folks at that age when we're like what you said, 4, 5, and 6, we're not thinking
Yeah.
sociologically. We're
Yeah.
not thinking like, oh, these resources that are here, these are my parents that are here, and there's a huge disconnect between
Yeah.
that and my parents. Institutionally, this is an institutional problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for us as kids, we're not like gonna put two and two together. So
Yeah.
yeah, this narrative starts at a really young age. And I just
Yeah.
really want to say this, it's to highlight it too. In really secure families with a lot of resources, this is still gonna pop up. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just also want to highlight that it's not like a result of, our parents not having secure connections with us too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm glad that you bring that up, because I know sometimes we're in a silo when we're having these conversations, but yeah, very much aware that there can only be so much generalizability. These are all just, here's what we've seen in our work, here's what we've experienced firsthand, and there's so many layers. So it's much more complex than how we talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And we would need a whole lecture series focused just on this to try to go into depth for that. Um, but something that I was thinking about as I was sharing that with you, right, is how that narrative shaped some of my interactions also as I was coming into adulthood, and how I experienced this in the therapy room with my clients as well, right? And some of the behavior patterns that manifested were a little bit of people pleasing, perfectionism, and then more likely to lead to burnout. And so that's why I have this next question to ask you. What is the relationship between this people pleasing and perfectionism? And how would you say these behaviors, or how do these behaviors go hand in hand and contribute to burnout?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think of like people pleasing and perfectionism as different sides of the same I'm not enough coin. Like if
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking about like I'm not enough being like a theme or a coin or a narrative, I think of like people pleasing, perfectionism working hand in hand. They are people pleasing is the idea that or not the idea, the actions or behaviors that support that everything you say yes to, everything, if you could just do something to unlock
Mm-hmm.
a puzzle, then you finally will gain the approval and belonging that you've been longing for through behavior.
Yeah.
And so perfectionism is when you work extra hard to meet a certain set of expectations that in your mind are right and wrong, and to just continue to get a little closer to that. And that I would call it kind of like low key obsession. To move towards that subconscious obsession, to move towards that is part of perfectionism. So people pleasing, being like the being the drive to unlock approval, perfectionism, unlocking approval through doing things a certain way. Um,
Yeah.
and there's like siblings. They like are cousins. They hang out really close with each other. And in Chinese, we have this term that's, growing up, we hear a lot. I heard a lot. Like, um, it's called 乖孩子. So you just like, it just means being a good kid. Like, and that good kid is like affirmed and used
Yeah.
as a form of like a carrot being dangled in front, like, oh, you could be a 乖孩子 and you could be accepted if you do these things, if you follow these
Hmm.
specific things.
Hmm.
And that's really a driving force with a lot of, young kids who we are very driven by like rules and following rules and getting the approval of our parents until we're old and we're like, oh my gosh, our parents are not here, but yet we're still
Hmm.
going to that carrot.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. The amount of times like either myself or like my clients are like, I feel like I'm in trouble. I feel like I'm
Right?
in trouble breaking a choice and having such a challenge with breaking out of that mentality, right? Of how do we transition out of starting to do things for ourselves, right? And so the second part of this question was, so also, by the way, I love thinking about it this way. There are like two parts of the same I am not enough coin, like that visual for me. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, absolutely, the people pleasing, the perfectionist. And I'm like, maybe this is a die actually, because I think there's so much within this I'm not enough. But I'll step away from that, because otherwise I can have a whole conversation about what fills this die, right? But how do these behaviors, would you say, so people pleasing, perfectionism, how do those contribute to the experience of burnout?
Yeah, if you think of like these behaviors that in my framework of coaching, I invite people to think of themselves as made up of multiple parts. And these parts
Mm-hmm.
you could think of as like personifications of your sub personality. So that just means like little parts of you that are like actually like little people inside of you that have their own behaviors, have their own thoughts. And, my people pleasing parts of me and my perfectionism parts, when they are really activated, they can keep me up at night. They can keep me
Yeah.
really like addicted to checking things off my metaphorical and literal to-do list in order to, you know, it's there's almost like a fixation, but it's very subconscious. I'm trying to like think of an example. For me, my dangling carrot is no longer like my mom and my dad, but it's what my mom and my dad always wanted me to do, which is like have financial security. And so for me, I don't think of like being a good kid anymore as like a traditional good kid. Like I just need to impress my parents. Now I'm in a
Yeah.
phase where I'm in my 40s and I'm not really thinking about consciously like pleasing my parents, but I unconsciously still think about pleasing and fulfilling their legacy, even if that legacy doesn't serve me. So that's my dangling carrot now that keeps
Yeah.
me awake. And so for me, when I think of really trying to befriend the parts of me that really want what they want, which is financial security, to retire early, to have plenty in my retirement account, and to like buy, a home for my parents or something, or like buy my parents something, to like make sure they're taken care of, or to like
Yeah.
really adorn them with like nice gifts or something. That is actually the part of me, if I really dig deep, is the part of me that keeps me not only like just doing the minimum amount of work that I need to do, but like
Yeah.
going above and beyond in a way that actually doesn't serve me. And so when I think of the parts of me that are like really mindful about seasonality and balance, those are the parts that are like, okay, Angela, do the minimum work required. And I'm really good at keeping at that. But when my people pleasing parts are activated, they're like, no, Angela, the minimum required is not enough because you're
Mm-hmm.
not enough. You have to go above and beyond to prove yourself that you could carry out your parents' legacy. You could
Yeah.
carry out and build a legacy that
Yeah.
will, reach out to my descendants or something. Like this part really drives me to like go above and beyond. And so really my work has been for my burnout, my particular flavor burn. Everyone has particular flavor. And for my
Mhm.
particular flavor, it's really motivated by unresolved intergenerational shit that
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
to do with safety equals financial security. Like that is what's underlying that. And I noticed
Mhm.
that theme going
Yeah.
beyond myself. Like this is a big theme of first and second gen folks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like even when in the first story that I shared, right? It's like when I think of my perspective around my family and the challenges that we had, like one of the big narratives around that is scarcity, right? There weren't a lot of resources. There wasn't a lot for us. So, as a kid, all I could think of or dream up or what I wanted was how do I get to the point where I don't have to worry about not having enough, right? It's not I'm not enough. It's have enough, right? And becoming a professional and arriving to the point where I don't have to think about am I going to make rent this month? I don't have to think about, how what can I afford when I walk into the grocery store, right? And that piece that comes with that, right? Like I can afford my basic needs and that feels really good and that now I feel safe. Now I feel stable, right? So that's what everyone needs to feel safe and stable because that's what finally helped me get there, right? So that as I hear you talk about that, it's like, no, exactly. Like even within my narrative, that's still such a strong belief system for me. Um, and it's so much more than that. Like safety does not necessarily just come with financial stability, and we could talk about all the different ways in which that cannot be. And again, that would be another series because
Yes.
we need to have. I was like, I'm getting a lot of ideas here,
Follow
but
up.
no, it's
Yes.
like lots of
Yes.
follow ups are necessary. But for some people, I talk about burnout as if this is something that most people are aware of, but something that I should know is for some people what the burnout experience is very different. And so what would you say are some common signs and symptoms of burnout for folks?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I drive really old cars. So Um, for me, I like to look at it whenever I look at my cars, it's like such a direct parallel to my life because my
Yeah.
cars are like 20 something years old. I'm almost 40. We're not the same age, but I know my car now enough that I know what's going to happen before the red engine light turns on. So
Okay.
when I think of burnout, I think of like your red engine light is already on, like in your car, and you can
Yeah.
sometimes still drive with it, but it's on the verge of collapsing. Like sometimes you could drive a really long time with your red engine light on, but sometimes you can't. It just depends on the
Yeah.
car. With my car, whenever that light comes on, I usually can't drive it anymore because of its flavor of burnout. And that's the same with my body. Like I've really been conditioned in my household to continue to keep driving my metaphorical body slash car beyond the red engine light turning on. So some of the signs for me when that happens is like I don't want to I start acting really slow. I start wanting to self isolate. Nothing like gives me pleasure anymore. And I think it's interesting how they did a study recently about how depression and shows up in black and brown bodies versus like
Hmm.
white bodied folks. And it shows up as irritability and anger and rage. And so what I noticed for me is that burnout shows up in that way too. Burnout and depression are kind of like cousins again. Um,
Yeah.
So for me, it shows up as like I not when my kids like do something that I usually find so much joy and delight in, I'm not even cracking a smile. I'm just like serious with myself and my
Yeah.
kids. Like if we're doing something fun, like it usually brings my inner child delight because my inner child is also doing something with them. But like my inner child is like suffering. It's like, no, I'm
Yeah.
done and I need a break. So that's how burnout shows up for me in my car.
Yeah.
My red engine light actually is gonna come on pretty soon, and we're taking it we're taking it to the mechanic like tomorrow. I'm not even joking. My car is gonna be taken in tomorrow. It's like, Angela, I need a break.
I love, again, you're so great with all of the different like metaphors. But yeah, the check engine, I've heard that a lot, like in terms of like, when do you know, like for your self-care, how do you begin to think about like caring for the different needs that you have before you arrive to that stage, right? But sometimes we don't feel that we have that option. Oh, I don't have enough time.
No.
I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to take this time off. I can't, like, and so I, but I agree with you in terms of how irritability is a common way that we might experience burnout, difficulty concentrating. I think one way I really describe it to folks is like, you're like counting down the minutes for your day to end. You're like, can't wait, and you just can't focus. Obviously, our sleep might be impacted in moments. And when we say sleep is impacted, that can be sleeping too much, not being able to sleep at all, or having very restless sleep, like anything that's a significant shift in what your usual sleep habits are, right? And so just some more additional symptoms of what it could look like for folks in general. But yeah, irritability, I think that's not one that we often think about for burnout. I think we expect it more of the fatigue because it's in the term. You think burnout, like, oh, I'm tired. No, car can't keep running. But sometimes it'll still run. It'll just make a lot of strange noises. It might just be doing some things there, but sorry, now I'm just thinking about your car. But anyway,
My
I'm
car be
noticing
making so many noises. I just also
you're
want
like,
to
hi.
normalize, like,
Mm-hmm.
what was that?
Oh no,
What
go
was that?
on.
Oh,
No,
I just
I
want
don't.
to normalize that, like, in first, second gen folks. Okay, I don't know about y'all, but in my family, it was just
Yeah,
normal to like let the check engine light go for a really long time and just like run on fumes, like literally and figuratively,
yeah,
with our cars and with our bodies, because I think
yeah,
that scarcity thing that goes back, like,
yeah,
oh, I can't afford to stop. I can't afford
yeah,
to rest. I can't afford to blah, blah, blah. But then what a lot of folks also notice in our communities is how these symptoms stop showing up emotionally. They start showing up physically in our bodies through like chronic pain and through
yes,
autoimmune diseases and other stuff because that check engine light's
yeah,
been on for a really long time. And um, that's where I usually catch folks in my office when the light's been on for a while and they're like overdue for a visit. But um, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to seek help. And I have
yeah,
compassion for folks who are very much like on the lurking end of, our web pages and our Instagram handles. So much compassion because there's not trust there. There's a lot of ruptures with getting help. And so
yeah.
yeah, I feel that. I feel that for folks too. Yeah.
It's so hard. It's so hard. Even when we talk about like, that's why, that's one of the reasons I have this show, right? It's to just help destigmatize mental health, try to help make it a bit more accessible to a community, because there's so much information out there. It can be one overwhelming, intimidating, and also like, and that's just based on the information available. That's not even incorporating our different belief systems that we were raised around what it means to care for ourselves, whether it's to care for ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally, all of that. There's such different narratives that maybe we've heard growing up that may add more barriers to actually asking for help. And the idea of asking for help, what we feel that we have to admit to ourselves sometimes, is really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I really think like burnout and the first, second gen community, there's so many barriers. There's like our hyper independence that causes us to like just not want to trust anyone else outside of ourselves until we absolutely need to outsource something. And so
Mm-hmm.
I do see a lot of folks towards the end of their like life cycle of burnout where they're like, I really can't do this anymore. And my body's breaking down and I need to ask for help at this point. And I have so much compassion because, that's there hasn't been historically a lot of space for first, second gen folks to trust the dominant culture and
Yeah.
people that are coming from dominant culture institutions. Like for me as a therapist, like I'm educated from the Western, schooling system, and I could represent, um,
Yeah.
a culture that's harmed so many of our people. So
Yeah.
I really do have a lot of compassion. And then you link that up with burnout. When you're in burnout, you're like, I'm so irritable. I don't even have enough. I'm so tired. I don't even have enough energy to even brush my teeth, let alone ask for help or search for help. So this layered stuff starts so young with I'm not enough, then perfectionism, people pleasing, on top of multiple other things. And that
Yeah.
search and that obsession, that fixation to like really get that dangling carrot, whatever it is for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
can cause us to be so hyper focused, and it looks very ambitious on the outside. Like it starts with ambition, it starts with a longing to fulfill some kind of hope or dream
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe sometimes unfulfilled in our families. And then
Yeah.
we just like go down this rabbit hole of, okay, I need to do it at all costs. And that segment of at all costs is the big thing that costs us everything.
Yeah. No, exactly. At all and at any cost. And so, Angela, this has been such an amazing conversation. But I was like, we went a bit over in time today, and so be respectful. So, as we talk about, people need to learning how to begin to how entertain the idea of getting help. Right? It's really important to also know it's like how do we access folks to even ask them for help. So, how can we support you and your work?
Yeah, thank you so much. I work with first and second gen immigrants of color. We work with third, fourth, fifth gen to folks too. And I work with folks globally in my coaching practice, to help folks create a space to transition in their career, either completely transition in their career or deepen their commitment to their career path. And whenever we talk about stuckness, parts of you wanting to move forward, parts of you being held back, we move in that space of stuckness to get you unstuck so that you could
Mm-hmm.
actually pursue what you want. And a lot of us first, second gen folks really don't have a clarity about what we want because it's been clouded by dominant culture and what they want in family. And so this program really, our coaching, 4-month coaching program, really helps people dial into what they want and to change their
Yeah.
relationship with themselves, their desires, their insecurities, their relationship with their money, and
Mm-hmm.
to really carve out a new path, to
Yeah.
redefine success and what it means, and to deepen their commitment to their hopes. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. So, if anyone's interested in joining your coaching program, do they just go on this website that is scrolling down here? Is there a different way of contacting you that would be easiest? This is it?
Yeah. The unburnoutstrategy.com is a
Yes.
good intro into like what my coaching program is about. But you could contact me through DMs to answer any questions through Instagram. At my handle is right there, Coach
Yeah.
Angela Tam.
Coach Angela Tam. So, DM her or like check out the unburnoutstrategy.com so you can get started. And another question I think people might have about this is this something that it's ongoing open enrollment? Do you have certain periods of time where it's available? Like when's your next, I guess, program start day? How's that work?
Yeah, my next cohort will be
Yes.
starting in beginning of September. So
Okay.
we have open enrollments right now for it, and
Okay.
welcome to apply. It's by cohort. So yeah, we work with
Thank you.
intimate groups of like 8
Yes.
folks, and once it fills up, it fills up. So we'd love, love, love to have folks
Yeah.
who are really contemplating a career change.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
I know that too. So now you know how to contact Coach Angela Tam if you need, and you have some time. So we're in August, and so you have a month to think about this. But I'm doing this assuming there's any open slots. If there's only 8, you all, there might not be as many left. So make sure you reach out to Angela soon.
Thank
So
you
thank you.
so much, Lisette, for having me.
Yeah.
And so grateful to share this space with you.
I am so grateful to share space with you. I'm so happy we connected. And I mean, this is why I love doing this. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for those of you who watched live. If you're watching the replay, thank you as well. Please share this with anyone who you think might benefit from this conversation, or anyone who you think would enjoy this just generally. These episodes go live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for as long as I can do this. And yeah, so thank you again, and see you soon.